Hello everyone and welcome to Wildcard Wednesday. My name is Ben Pulowski. I'm one of our Geotab product trainers and I will be leading the webinar session here today. Thank you very much for joining us on today's session. Our topic for today is managing and protecting your data with users, groups, and security clearances. So this is going to be more of a how-to session in the MyGeotab software in the database. We're going to provide you with some resources before the end of the webinar here today so that you can take what we're doing here and take this and use this on your own database as well. So you will be able to leave and hopefully be able to apply some of the things that we're showing you here today. Here is our agenda for today's training session. So just want to start with a little bit of an overview on managing data and exactly what that means and why you'd want to do it. And then we're going to get into a little bit more of the database features. Now, I said that this is more of a how-to session than it is. I don't want to spend too much time walking you through click here, then click here. We'll spend some time on that, but again, you are going to be provided with some resources of your own at the end to take with you and be able to do this yourself. And you can see there some of the topics we're going to cover: groups, users and data access, security clearances, zones, rules and reporting, using the groups filter within the MyGeotab database, and finally some different resources. So let's jump in here and we'll talk about managing your data a little bit. And what we're trying to do is give you the tools to properly organize your fleet and your assets through the use of groups. Everything really comes back to groups. We'll show you how to set up your groups hierarchy, and once you've done that, you can take those groups and you can apply them to vehicles, to users, to zones, to rules, and reports. And you can control what everyone can see and what everyone can do. Ideally, this is a process that you're going to go through when first starting up a database. If you're a user already, obviously you don't have that luxury. You still can reorganize your groups even with an existing database, and that's something that either we or your existing reseller can assist you with. So some of the reasoning behind this: what's the need to manage your data? And just some different examples for you. You might need to manage your data based on different locations. For example, you have different locations for your company, for your fleet, and you want a manager in one location to only be able to see their own vehicles. Or maybe you have different branches regionally. You have a regional manager, you want them to be able to see multiple locations. You have drivers, and you want those drivers to receive emailed reports, but only on their own behavior, right? And that's something where you would have each driver as his or her own group. You might have it where you want a user to edit certain vehicles in the database, but when your emailed reports go out, they should receive reports for a larger group. You might have different vehicle types that will have different rules applied to them, like different vehicle classes, or if you have different vehicle locations, you want to use different speeding rules. You might have different idling rules for vehicles in a colder climate, or if you only want zones to be visible to specific users. So these are just some different examples of things that we're trying to accomplish through the use, ultimately, of groups, and I'm sure there are many more that are not listed here. So data access and grouping are really at the core of Geotab's data management. This is the takeaway. Any data that you do or do not want a user to be able to see can be controlled through data access and through grouping. It all comes back to that. So groups, as I've mentioned, allow you to organize vehicle zones, rules, and users into different categories. When you create your groups, assets can be assigned to more than one group. So if you look at that little screenshot I have down there below, we have the company group, and we have, for example, department, and we have locations. So I can have vehicle number 1 that is in my maintenance department, and vehicle number 1 is also in my north location. You can assign them to more than one group. An asset can only belong to one group in a branch. So that is to say, it cannot belong to both a parent and a child group. So that same vehicle 1, I cannot assign it to both locations and east, because that's part of the same branch under the company group. I can only assign them to east or locations. East is, of course, a child of the locations group. The top level group will always be called company group. Unfortunately, that is not something that you can edit. But if you go into your database right now and you go to your group's hierarchy, you're going to see, even when you're first starting out, you have a group there called company group. And your entire hierarchy you can fill in underneath that. Some different examples of ways that you might want to group your database. You can group it by location or region if you have offices in different locations. You can group it by vocation or department, different vehicle types, miscellaneous, compliance if you have some vehicles, Class 8 interstate vehicles that are subject to the ELD mandate. Another topic here as well, which is shown in the screenshot, is reporting. So if you want to have users with visibility to certain things within the database, but when emailed reports go out, maybe they see a larger or a smaller group of vehicles or just their own vehicle. Creating a group is pretty straightforward. Again, you'll get resources, you'll get this resource and some others at the end, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the click here, click there. But really all you have to do, you go to your groups under Rules and Groups, and when you want to create a new group, click on the parent group, and then you can click on that little plus sign over there on the right. So here we've clicked on the Locations group, and if I want to create a new group inside of there, in addition to East, North, South, and West, I can click on that plus sign, I can create a new subgroup. When I do that, I enter a name for the group. If I want to, I can choose a color and a transparency for the group, and then I click the Save button. And that's all there is to it. So pretty simple and pretty straightforward to create a group. Usually the next thing you're going to want to do after you create a group is you are going to assign vehicles to a group. Again, pretty simple. You go to your Vehicles tab in the database, you choose the vehicle you want to assign. You have the Groups tab that you can click on, and then there's a drop-down list. Again, you can assign a vehicle to multiple groups in different branches. It can't be assigned to both a parent and a subgroup, but you can see this vehicle right here is assigned to Company Group, Company-Wide Reports, and Driver 1. When you're done, click the Save button. This shows you how to assign your vehicles to groups one at a time, but you can also do that in bulk. Getting into users a little bit. So there's a few different reasons that you would want to, after you create your groups, assign users to groups. So number one, you may want to filter a user's view to only specific vehicles. And that's probably the most common application. I have my office in Albuquerque, and they don't need to worry about the vehicles in Columbus. Number two, you can allow for emailed reports. So when I'm sending out my weekly exceptions report or my monthly scorecard, they're only going to see the vehicles that apply to them. Number three, also visibility of specific exceptions. So maybe I have a special idling rule for my vehicles in Albuquerque. Again, my managers in Columbus, that doesn't apply to them. They don't need to see it, and I can create a rule and assign it to that group. Users can also be assigned to groups not in their data scope for the purpose of receiving reports. I'm actually going to come back to that point in a second. Assigning a user to a group is a very simple process, as most of this is. So if you navigate to your users list, which is under Administration, and you choose the user you want to assign, every single user has a data field called Data Access. Now when you first create a user, by default, that user will have access to everything, which is the company group. They can see all vehicles. Their data access is limited when you choose a group from the drop-down list, and you can save when you're finished. Again, like vehicles, users can be assigned to multiple groups. Now, after you have assigned a user to a group, and you can see here, this user, they have their data access of admin reporting. After you've given them a data access, another field appears below that, and that says additionally allow reporting by these groups. And that allows users to receive reports, be able to access reports for groups to which they are not otherwise a member in their data access. So I gave an example earlier of when a user logs into the database, they are only going to see one group of vehicles, so maybe one office location, but when the emailed reports go out, I want them to see a few different regional locations, or vice versa. So that's the point of that. You can differentiate between what they see, the vehicles they see when they log into the database, and the data they can access through reporting. This might also be used if you have a driver and you want them to receive a report on their own vehicle and only them. So maybe when they log in, they can see everyone in their group, but when the emails go out, I only want them to see themselves. Now, You also don't have to worry about this. Most of the time, it's going to be they have data access to maintenance vehicles, and when the reports go out, they're going to see maintenance vehicles, in which case you don't have to worry about that. Additionally, allow reporting by these groups. You don't have to fill something in there. By default, it's going to look for what their data access is. We also have in the database security clearances. And very simply put, security clearances control what a user can or cannot see and do in the database. Every single database has 6 default clearances. They cannot be edited, they cannot be removed. The 6 default clearances, and this is in order from the most ability to the least: administrator, supervisor, view only, default user, drive app user, which would be for a user who's only going to be using GeoTab Drive. And then you also have nothing, which is really just access to the product guide in your database. You'll get a resource at the end that shows you what each one of these clearances is capable of seeing and doing in your database. I mentioned these are the default security clearances and you can't change them. But what you can do is you can create custom security clearances, and I'll get to that next. And the reason that we have these different security clearances, again, some different examples of why you would want to use this. So number one, you want to limit the capabilities of a specific user or a group of users. Maybe your maintenance manager, they don't need to view drivers' trips on a map and they shouldn't be concerned with it, and you can remove that feature for them. Remove visibility of unused features. Remove HOS or DVIR from My GeoTab for all users. You want to prevent users from being able to edit other users. Prevent an admin user from being able to edit or change options of another top-level admin user. Or if you want to set a clearance level where drivers can be created and assigned to vehicles, but they have no access to My GeoTab. Just some different examples. The most common one is going to be the first one in the list. Limit the capabilities. You just want to have control over what they can do and the data they can see. When you create a user, or you can also edit an existing user, if you navigate to your users list through administration, select the user you want to edit, and you can choose a security clearance from the drop-down list and save when you're done. So you only get to choose one security clearance for them. That drop-down right there is showing the 6 default security clearances that are built in already. Standard security clearances, again, cannot be modified, but you can clone an existing security clearance and you can modify it. So when you navigate to your users list, up at the top, you're going to have a button that says Clearances. When you click that button, it's going to give you a list over on the right of the 6 clearances, and you can choose which one you want to clone. Now, something to keep in mind here is you want to create as little work for yourself as possible. So if you have an idea of what you want this new security clearance to be able to do, try and choose something as similar to that as possible. Click the clearance that you want to clone, and it's going to bring you to that screen that's shown down there at the bottom, and you have a button up at the top that says Add Subclearance. So you can give your subclearance a name. This one we've titled Subadmin, no HOS, no DVIR. It's then going to show you a checklist of all the different features that particular clearance is able to access, whether they can administer, whether they can view, whether they can report, whether they can make changes. Green check mark means they can do it. The red X means that they can't do it. And when you're editing this new subclearance, you can just toggle those on or off. Just click on that green check or that red X to either give or take away. There is a search feature there if you want to find specific features, and when you're done, click Save. And after you do this, when you save this new subclearance that you've created, it's going to appear in the drop-down list under Security Clearances when you are assigning users. Groups can also be applied to zones. By default, new zones are assigned to the company group and are visible to all users. Now, that's just meaning being able to click on the map and see a zone. Now, even if a user has been assigned to a specific data access, if the zone is assigned to the company group, it will still be visible to that user. Now, really, the only reason that you would want to assign a group to a zone is if you want to prevent users from seeing the zone on the map. That's it. A lot of times, people will go in, they'll create their zones, They create their groups, they add their vehicles, and just by default, they're assigning zones to groups. Well, sometimes that's creating more work for you than you actually need to do, because again, the only need to assign a zone to a group is if you want to keep a user from seeing that zone. If you don't care, you don't have to do this. There's 3 examples down there at the bottom, and these are all using the zone called Battery Park. Before that, let me just highlight that screenshot there of the zone hierarchy. This is the same as before. We have company group, locations, and inside of locations, we have east, north, south, and west. Example number 1, I'm looking in the lower left here. Zone name, Battery Park, it's assigned to the company group. The user has a data access of the north group. That user can see that zone, because regardless of data access, if the zone is assigned to the company group, everyone can see it. Example number 2 in the middle. Battery Park is assigned to the locations group, and the user has data access of the north group. That user can still see that zone because north is a subgroup of the locations group. Example number 3. Now that zone has been assigned to a subgroup inside of locations. That zone is now assigned to the east group. The user is still assigned to the north group. Now this user cannot see that zone because they are assigned to a different group within that one single branch. Getting into rules and reporting, similar to zones, when a rule is assigned to the company group, it affects all vehicles and it affects all users. Your stock rules, which are your hard acceleration, braking, cornering, speeding, seatbelt, idling, that big long list of rules that you have in your database, those are assigned to the company group. You cannot change that. No matter what you do, those stock rules that are built in will be applied to every single vehicle in your fleet. However, you can create custom rules that can be applied to either an individual group or multiple groups. Now, to assign a custom rule to a group, if you go to your rules list under rules and groups, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you're going to have a list of any custom rules that are in your database. If you click on the custom rule, it's going to bring you to a screen like you see there on the right, and it says publish to groups. You can choose a single group or multiple groups from that list. You can take these rules, you can apply them to multiple groups, decide what vehicles you want this to apply to, and then hit the save button when you're done. Moving forward, this rule will only apply to vehicles in those selected groups. So if I have Group A and Group B, I create a rule for Group A. It just will not apply to those vehicles in Group B. It's a non-event if they break that rule. It similarly goes for reporting. And when you set up your dashboard reports or you set up your emailed reports, there's 2 different things that you can do there. You can set up your viewers. And that means the report will only be visible to users within a certain group. This is if you go into administration and you're going through your reports. For a dashboard report, you have dashboard viewers. For an emailed report, you have a recipient list. So that's who can view the report. The other option is the report should only show data for a certain group of vehicles. So there you have dashboard viewers, recipient list, who can see the report. And then you also have belonging to. And that refers to the groups that will be included in the report. So if I have a problem with my vehicles in Chicago, they have excessive idling, I can put that Chicago group into that belonging to drop-down, and that way when the report goes out to whoever is in the recipient list, it's only going to show vehicles in that group. Now again, the data access of the user is going to be the filter. So if I have belonging to Chicago and my user only has a data access of Los Angeles, they're not going to be able to see it. So everything is filtered through that user's data access. That is something to keep in mind. You also have a tool in the database. So if you are just wanting to run a report ad hoc, or if you want to go to your map and only pull up vehicles in a specific location, or run a report for only a specific group, you can use the groups filter, and that's located in the upper left corner of your database. This lets you filter your view of the database to see only specific groups belonging to tiers lower than you. Go to your groups filter in your upper left. You can click on that little drop-down arrow. So for example, this groups filter on the right, we've applied maintenance. So now whatever we do in the database, we're only going to see vehicles applied to the maintenance group until you click that X next to maintenance and get rid of it. You can filter to multiple groups. What's going to happen there is the database is going to display both sets of groups. It's not the overlap. It's not vehicles assigned to South America and passenger cars, vehicles in both groups. No, it's going to show you both groups. So filter set to South America and passenger cars. The system will show all vehicles belonging to South America and all vehicles belonging to passenger cars, as opposed to only the vehicles that overlap between the two groups, if that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground here today in a relatively short period of time, and this is what I think is going to be most valuable to you. I'm going to send out a link to this deck here in just a second. But there's pretty much 3 different groups of resources here that I think are going to be valuable. So the first group that we have is how-to guides. So these are step-by-step guides on how to accomplish these things in the database. These are all linked, so I can just click on this, and it's going to take me to the how-to guide on groups. And it's going to walk me through just about everything there is to know about groups from beginning to end. We have here features and benefits. Why do you want to set up groups? How you can use groups. And we even get into step 1, step 2, step 3, click here, click there. All these categories are here and available to you. So groups, adding and editing users, applying that data access, security clearances, how to assign them, how to build security clearances, zones, creating zones, custom rules, and automating reports. Second category we have is how-to videos. Same thing as the how-to guide, except in video form. So if here I can click on this video for security clearances. This is going to link me to a YouTube video on how to create and assign security clearances within the GeoTab database. And that's here for groups, users, edit user options, security clearances, adding zones, and automating reports. We have our other group down here at the bottom. The first link in this list here is a quick reference guide. So this is in sort of opposition to the how-to guide, which is a very detailed step-by-step. It's providing context and a lot of screenshots and all that. It's pretty well organized. This quick reference guide is just that. It's really just step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. There's a lot of good information in here. I've highlighted a couple of different categories that might be useful to you. One is mass editing vehicles. So if you have 100 vehicles in your fleet, you don't have to click on one at a time and assign each vehicle to a group. You can do mass editing and assign as many vehicles as you want to a group at one time. You can do the same with users if you want to apply data access. So if I want to have 20 users as a supervisor, I don't have to do it one at a time. I can mass edit. These will show you how to do that. The final link that I have here is a link to standard security clearances. And this is just a document that shows you each of these 6 built-in security clearances. It shows you the name of the clearance as it appears in the database. It gives you a brief description on what that clearance means. And it tells you over here what clearance has access to it. So administrator, as I mentioned, is the highest level of clearance. They have yeses for everything. Below it, administrator is a supervisor, and you can see exactly what they can or cannot do. And I encourage you to use this as a resource if you're going to create your own security clearance. Use this as a starting point. Again, create as little work for yourself as possible. If you know what you want a user to be able to do, start with this and sort of pick the one where you're going to have to make the least amount of changes to it. That's actually going to conclude our formal presentation. Again, my name is Ben Pulowski. We thank you for joining us today. Also, please remember, for more fleet tips and best practices, visit geotab.com/blog. Register for our blogs. We are actively adding great content and reads, so please make sure to check it out. We'd love to have you on board. Again, my name is Ben Pulowski. On behalf of myself and everyone here at Geotab, thank you for attending. We wish you a productive and profitable week.